Hi everyone, I'm here with Brendan Hoare, current CEO of BioPure New Zealand, former executive chairman of Organics Aotearoa New Zealand, all-round expert on all things, everyone hates that word expert, but I'm going to use it anyway, expert on all things organics and GMOs in New Zealand, has decades of experience, and we're here to talk about the proposed legislation that's on everyone's mind. So, welcome Brendan, thank you for accepting this invitation for an interview.
Yeah, great to be here. Thank you.
So I thought we'd start off with your background, your credentials, your experience over the past few decades. What is your authority when it comes to this topic?
Yeah, thanks. So I've got a long history in organic. It's basically my life's work. As a student since I was 18, formal qualifications, managed research farms, spent 6 years in the field looking at traditional agriculture and how societies have sustained soil for thousands of years in the same place. Fascinated in that and remain very close to Asia with that. I've been, really a lot of my work has been around organisational and transformational change. I was president of the Soil and Health Association of New Zealand, developed an Organic 2020 vision forward for the country, saying, look, you know, where else in the world could be organic, and I reckon New Zealand's a really good place to do that. And then stepped away. I was on the BioGrow board for 10 years. I've been on the World Board of Organic. And I've also, through that role, was also on Unilever's a Sustainable Advisory Board. I was also pretty instrumental in bringing about the national body Organics Aotearoa New Zealand and bringing in Te Waka Kaiora as a treaty partner in 1999. Pretty good at getting money from government. We established Organic Farm NZ, which was through the Greens and Labor. We got a $500,000 grant to get up a local food certified organic system. And look, I've just really dedicated myself to the transformation and the ability to bring organic about. And I remain connected globally. Our business trades, we do consultancy, we do trade. We are actually an exporter of organic and non-organic, or people on that journey, and do a lot of organisational development both here in Australia, particularly around the Pacific Rim, Asia and USA.
Awesome. Great introduction. And I should say, Brendan practices what he preaches. We're here at this beautiful organic property somewhere out of Auckland. So I've loved coming out here for this interview. I thought I'd best start off with a question just so that you, me, and the listeners, we're all on the same page. What is a GMO, and the plant and animal parts of that, of that answer?
Sure. So a GMO methodology is using science to transfer genes, whether they're from the same species or not, is a transference of genes into a new organism in its simplicity. It's the best way I could describe it.
Right. And so when I was going with plants and animals, there's obviously the plant or crop variety is I think what most people are familiar with, right? So they've heard of GMO soy or GMO corn being grown. America's big in that. But also on the animal side, what I was getting at is if an animal is fed genetically modified feed, then that animal becomes contaminated, or it's
there's a transference.
We are what milk we eat. Or flesh, whatever.
Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly.
We are what we eat. We are what we drink. We live in a living environment. It's not inert. We're not living in a lab. So absolutely, what we eat is who we are and what we become, and that's fairly well understood in the health system. Which is why one of the key maxims in the whole of the organic community globally is healthy soil, healthy food, healthy people. I am what I eat. So healthy soil, and if there's that connection with soil and where we're from and what we eat, and it's our medicine. Food is our medicine, and it can also be our toxin.
We'll get into health a bit later. So what has been the status of legislation surrounding genetically modified organisms in New Zealand over the past sort of 3, 4, 5 decades, as far as you're aware? How has it changed over time to get to where we are now?
Look, the crunch of it was we had a moratorium in New Zealand at the turn of the century. That was a really big deal for New Zealand. It was election issue. There was books written on it there was some scandals. And so the GE moratorium, where we've held a position which we've been content with to date, is that it's best kept. We're not anti-science. We're really keen for it to be in the lab. We do not want field release of GMO, and there's also been labelling, clear definition of labelling, because that has been the position and that is what we've had, and we're in the middle of some radical change with that.
I think one of the topics that's worth going into for listeners is that there's there's people out there who are not so interested in organics. They're really interested in the science of genetic engineering and whatnot. But one of the big issues, I assume at that point in time, I was only 8 when that happened, was that New Zealand benefits economically from its GE-free status because our conventional produce fetches premium prices. Could you go into that topic?
So, yeah, that's a very good point. New Zealand's position globally is recognised as a non-GMO market for product. And there's real markets for that, whether that's seed, all the way through the supply chain and product and processed food as well, that we can make a legitimate claim that we're non-GMO. So we trade with companies and businesses that aren't organic, that still trade on a non-GMO platform. And people expect that. One thing for people to just to sort of appreciate, I spend a lot of time in market. We've worked with NZT, taking delegations to Australia, Korea, Taiwan, USA. They love what organic offers. They love what non-GMO offers. They love what New Zealand offers. So being a Kiwi with a product gets you into market. But you've got to have more than that. What else have you got? Because there's other competitors in the market. And our position to be non-GMO has been well recognised and has enabled us to get into door and make trade deals and make success and grow the business of food export for New Zealand.
And let's just clarify exactly what New Zealand's GE-free status was/is, as established at that point in time, because it meant obviously no crops could be GE crops could be grown commercially around New Zealand, but were there labs in New Zealand doing this stuff indoors?
Sure, and it's happening today. And so there's science taking place on a daily basis, and that's happening in the lab. In high-risk environments, which that product is disposed of correctly. Right. I mean, historically, we've found times where there has been contained field trials, which, and there were some quite famous cases in New Zealand where they had to be pulled. And of course, there's the corn gate issue historically, where product coming into New Zealand was introduced into the field. And that was the election, I think it was 2003 election, that was a real issue on. So that's why we have biosecurity. It's really important for our whole integrity as a country, not just with foot and mouth, but for things like GMO. We don't want unwanted product in the country let loose. No way. Our markets are very sensitive to the New Zealand proposition, and are becoming more so, whether that includes pesticides, it includes the way our adherence to climate change regulation. We've got to be seen to be leading, and if you want to be a leader in the market, you have to lead, and you have to be on the edge constantly. It's a big job, but it's fun.
This one maybe you need to get research something on your phone, but I just realised a really good question to ask is, how much money do we make as a country off our non-GMO status?
Now there you go. I'd love to know that. Now, if we were going to mess with the market, you'd want to know everything before you hustled and made that change. So I'd want to know exactly that question. I'd want to know customer preference by country in our major markets. So Australia, China, USA, Europe, Japan, Taiwan. Taiwan's our 7th biggest trade partner. We'd have to ask them, and we'd listen. Now, when I'm selling, I'm weaker than the person buying. It's all the buyer has money in their pocket. I don't. So I have to listen to the market and respond to that.
Seems like an obvious thing to do. Consult the customers.
It is not only obvious. It is the responsible thing to do. It is actually about good governance, good leadership. If you were employing a marketing manager or someone in the market, and we were sitting on a board and someone just went out and made a change like that without conferring with the whole system, the supply chain system, the whole system, you'd be down the road. So we're not messing around here. This is absolutely crucial. And there's a number of companies in New Zealand that position themselves as non-GMO. Zespri, Fonterra, these brands know that their market demands premium. If they're going to pay a premium, you have to be premium. That's the way it is.
So as this discussion nationally continues, I mean, do you think we'll see and hear from some of these large companies that really do have a vested interest in keeping things GE-free in New Zealand.
Yeah, I'd love to. I think it would be so what we've been asking, what the national body of organics has been asking, is a conversation. So right now, we're being talked at, we're being talked about, but we're not being talked with. So we're having our conversations, we're reaching out to ministers for ask for meetings, because this is not just about a single minister. This is about food, environment, labelling, health. We want to have a proper conversation with this, with all players, and that would be the good governance thing to do. It's silent at the moment, but we have reached out and requested for that, and we do want people to understand our side of the argument, and also the science, and also the market and the production, to hear from farmers. So one thing potentially I think is quite important for people to understand, and I don't think the government understands, organic is a full market share. We're not just dairy, we're not just sheep, we're not just kiwi fruit, we're not just apples. We're feminine hygiene, we're carrots, fine wines. We're a full market share. Anywhere you go into a lot of wine, 10% of New Zealand is certified organic wine. Plus we're retail. We're a full supply chain is certified. It's a process. And so understanding that we're not just a single voice, we're actually a magnified voice across the whole food chain is really important. So it's not just a squeak, it is a real voice to be heard and understood and engaged with, to understand what that edge and opportunity is.
Let's go into the proposed legislation, what it could mean practically for the everyday New Zealander.
Well, the labelling 1 through FSANZ, Australia and New Zealand, what that would mean is you may not know what you're buying. Okay, and so those of us who follow a process, those of us who work hard to actually say that it's organic will have to work double hard on that. And what, the new breeding techniques being espoused will just be a big grey smudge in the middle, and it's all okay.
And basically, if you're a consumer that
you won't know,
is really motivated, you might have to go send an email to the company, or find out some other way.
Now people do that, or you may get activists creating lists of brands that don't care online.
But it becomes a hurdle.
It becomes a hurdle. It's like all the numbers, right? So unless you're dedicated to food and health, then for the masses, it's just going to be
overwhelming. Yeah, because people say things like, "Oh, just don't choose it." Just don't avoid it, but you won't know. And you'd have to be quite a motivated consumer to...
Correct. You're going to have to be a motivated consumer, but in fact, our awareness is a lot of the time consumers are exhausted. Right? There's an exhaustion in the consumer. So there's two things going on. You've got the split going on of consumers who are quite aware and will remain aware. And I don't know why you'd want to divide the society like this when we've got so many health issues.
Yeah.
And then you get those people just coping. And they'll just take cheaper and cheaper food, where in fact health food does not necessarily have to be cheap. It doesn't have to be expensive. Everybody can afford a good diet in that space. So we're very, very disturbed about that, both from an Australia and New Zealand perspective. We've been working very closely with the Australian the community in Australia on this, including Tasmania.
Tell us about the example there.
Well, Tasmania has a moratorium on GMO, so their conventional community and organic community, the whole sort of the island, has created an exemption to have a moratorium on GMO release into the environment in Australia, and they've created a whole market from that.
And that's the thing is, Tasmania, it's an island. New Zealand, it's two islands.
Well,
and some small ones. Could we not maybe?
Well, you don't have to have much of imagination to understand the global. If people get a feel for the total world food supply, the opportunity for us, we just supply elite pallets. We don't feed masses. This is part of the mythology, really. We feed 40 million. No, we don't. We don't feed 40 million. There's all this. So in a sense, what's happening, we've left this industrial age, but not its mythology. And so what we've got is this perpetuation of this mythology. And I can't think of a better myth than this classic book here, which is this guy, Dennis Avery, from the Hard Institute, a very proud right-wing think tank, Saving the Planet with Pesticides and Plastics. And it's a 1990s book that really captures, and this is saying that pesticides and plastics will save this planet.
And the important point for listeners to understand, this is not a sarcastic or ironic title.
This is a counter to the whole organic, we don't want pesticides and plastics in the environment. Yeah. So what we do know, and there's a lot of literature on this, is that the more GMOs, we're actually getting more pesticides in the system, more pollutants, more reliance on artificial inputs, and that is happening here in New Zealand as well. So we know, for example, in the South Island with drinking water, all the nitrates in the drinking water, and there's very real science to say that a lot of that's non-potable, you shouldn't be drinking it. And research has been done by GNS to prove that. And guess what? They know that it's not geese and ducks. It's synthetic fertilizer. So this perpetuation of this industrial food model where needs to stop and should stop. And consumers and customers are very conscious of that. And that's why in relationship with that farmer relationship, organics has been able to grow and is the fastest growing multi-food sector in the world. You know, over approximately 250 billion New Zealand dollars and growing. And so we should listen to that and respond to that. And I would imagine, you know, if we saw ourselves as producing food for the world, we'd really want to beautifully slice into that and be seen as the best and non-GMO and really proud of it. It doesn't stop us doing the research in the lab and experimenting with that and learning about the genome and the interactions. But the science is really confined within a very narrow piece of science. It doesn't look at ecology, it doesn't look at the physics, it doesn't look at all the other pieces together that makes that a food system. And ultimately, I think what it does is it demonstrates, you know, if we listen carefully to what's been espoused and what's being talked about, is that we're still very production-led, industry-led, just more, like pump out the machine. Where in fact, what's happened in the market is a customer and producer relationship is becoming more intimate. Producers need to listen to who's buying their product and get with them and then create product for your buyer. Now that's what most people in business do. They create products for a buyer and they listen to their buyer, they engage with their buyer and refine their product so the relationship gets deeper and deeper and is solid. And I just think we're still in seller mode, producer mode, just count the cash. Commodity is very narrow, very disappointing when all key leaders and marketers and advertising and people in the world who help us generate income as a country aren't listened to.
What opportunities do you think this new situation could present for the organics industry? For example, increased demand? Because of the awareness it's created, people are upset about it?
Yeah, that's not our sentiment.
Okay.
Our sentiment is, so there's no research from government going into organic. We have a brand new Organic Act to protect organic. That was necessary for trade. It's a domestic regulation. At the moment, we see it as a threat because of our leverage of a whole non-GMO and above. Because what happens in the market, being certified organic, like I was saying to you before for conventional, being from New Zealand, cool. Being certified organic, great. What else have you got? So companies layer that up with fair trade, B Corp. So to be great, you've got to be really good. And I think New Zealand and our production systems needs to be good. So we see that as a real chink and could be really detrimental. And it could cause, like spray drift. So pollen drift, everyone experiences pine pollen on their windscreens or pollen and flower. There's no legal cadastral boundaries on this. So if there's gene drift, like spray drift, there could be loss. So liability is something we're really concerned about, the cost, propriety and propriety. Who will pay? If I lose an opportunity here, who's going to pay for that? That hasn't been addressed. No one wants to talk about it. There's no discussion.
that was one of the questions our listeners sent in. What precautions would be taken to stop GMO products or crops that spreading to surrounding farms or suburban areas?
There's no discussion, Tane. It's outrageous. There's no discussion. There's no.
That has been an issue overseas, hasn't it?
Absolutely,
Australia and Canada.
There's court cases. There's people try to push. So it often who's got the biggest company, and there has been payout. And so we're seeing payouts from with pesticide companies now taking liability. It's the same businesses, by the way. The people promoting this story, it's the same business today, just with now investing into GMOs, and it's about IP and control of the food chain. So what we're saying is we need that discussion, and that will affect not just organic growers, but anyone. This is a loss of freedom of choice. Freedom of choice from a consumer who wants to purchase something and doesn't need to look up an encyclopedia or go online to find out. But it's also a grower and or a region loss of choice. If a region wants to be GMO free, like the Hawke's Bay is, like Tasmania is, they want to retain that status because they've got an economic strategy for themselves. There's potential loss of choice here. And it's unacceptable. It's not a democracy.
Let's switch to politics.
Yep.
Everybody loves politics. Does the Green Party support the organics industry? I mean, because across the population, the people who value and consume organics, it doesn't matter which, there's people in every single political party, political persuasion that purchase organic products, but one would think that the Green Party might be a natural home for a larger share of those consumers. Is that the case?
Well, I mean, just the organic community, the organic sector is politically agnostic. We work with all political parties. That's how we got the Organic Act through Parliament. Ministers come and go, parties come and go. So if we want change over time, I mean, we're an 85-year organisation in New Zealand, okay? So political parties come and go, and we got full consensus for the Organic Act of all political parties. They thought it was a good move to do. So that in principle. Now, the Greens has always been a logical safe home for us, and they've been very clear of their position of a non-GMO position. But they're not in power. And I haven't sort of, I mean, they're preoccupied at the moment with a lot of other politics, internal business. But we are in an environment where they're just not listened to, and we don't particularly get a lot of, we are in contact with all political parties. Our focus is those which are in power at the moment, and there's 3 in a coalition, and we will continue to work really hard with them. And what would be good for all political parties is to use the word organic a little bit more. We're a $1 billion sector. They should be proud of that. Basically run from the community with very little injection or research or investment from government, doing exceptionally well. And it would be nice just to respond to an email, respond to a phone call, invite us into a place, have discussions, and all political parties can do that. But the phone ain't ringing at the moment.
It looks like there's an opportunity there for a political party to be the one that will listen and engage.
Absolutely. I would want them all to. I mean, they all supported the Act. This is a central part of the Act, and the GMO piece should be in our regulations because it's a non-permitted activity and this is something, I mean, globally, very well organised, okay, the organic community globally. We know that non-GMO is part of our offer, okay. It's a non-permitted activity. Standards aren't set by government, the standards aren't set by producers. The whole supply chain is involved in setting organic standards. That's really important. So it's an agreed contract which we work together on to create the organic standard. Consumers don't want it. That's the market. This helps with conventional as well. So our regulation needs to have very explicitly non-GMO as a non-permitted activity.
How many other countries are GE-free like New Zealand has been?
None.
I think that's really... Probably should have asked that earlier in the interview.
It's
a pretty big deal.
So, in business, it's your unique selling point.
Yes.
Right? What have I got that no one else has? It gets me at the front of the queue.
Yeah.
I mean, as I explained...
Because I would have assumed, sorry to interrupt, that countries like Switzerland or Liechtenstein or there'd be some niche places, maybe Luxembourg, I don't know, that are on our level in that respect. Is New Zealand really head above the wall?
In field and environment, we've got it. And instead of blaming the organic sector, the whole conventional should go like, thanks guys, that's cool.
Because it's lifted their value.
Totally. Well, it's retained because, we're a bit tired of pesticides and pesticides and pesticides and plastics are going to save the world. We've been saying for decades, that's not smart. And now we know it's not smart. 3 decades later, we're reaping, it rains plastic. It's in our bodies. We talk about microplastics everywhere. Yeah. And we don't like to be the kind of community that says, I told you so, but we knew so. And we're suggesting that this is exactly the same mentality by the same people, the same pattern, this industrial sort of, don't worry, trust the technology, we've got it covered. Liability, sorry, didn't hear that, we'll just keep moving. Enough. And it's, looking for some proper leadership here.
Do you see this proposed legislation and this national conversation that's happening now kicking off a sort of nationwide protest or campaign of some sorts? For sure,
yeah. So we are aware of irate, not being listened to, being ignored. I mean, there's quite a few people at the moment feeling like that with this government, not being listened to or ignored. But I'm very conscious of what's happened historically in New Zealand with the GE-free movement and the GMO and this awareness raising, particularly with mothers. Right. Particularly people dealing with health issues. And what's happened over the last 20 years is people's specific health needs have exasperated, become more so, putting more pressure on the organic market to serve those. So yeah, we would expect that. And so what we'd love is to be invited in the front door for a discussion. There's an act in Parliament, that's been passed by governments in the past, and all political parties agreed to. You would think there'd be a discussion across interministerially.
Another question from our listeners: how have science communications organisations contributed to shifting the public opinion in favour of biotechnology? How can the public identify manipulative PR on this issue versus genuine science?
Okay. Well, a thing I always love to do. So, I had an academic background. I didn't mention that at the beginning, but what's an absolute scientific fact is that we know next to nothing. That is absolute scientific fact. The language being used right now by physicians and all their presentations and their literature, just don't worry, this is the same as nature. This is all the same as nature. And that is the type of spin, when you're that desperate to sell something and you call it the same as nature, that I would caution any entity making that claim, the same as nature, because we're so distant from it. Something in a lab that's got the IP and controlled around it. So anything that espouses that it's the same as nature, I'd raise of caution. Because we're continually learning with nature, it's a continuous adaptation. And that's fundamentally one of the core things with organic, is that each season's different, each environment's different. It's a constant adaptation. So what they're looking at in the whole language is it's okay. And the consistent one that's being used, it used to be called GE. They didn't like the word engineering because they got dealt to in communications with the GE. They changed it to GMO, right? Now it's gene editing.
So those three terms, gene engineering...
They're all the same, mate. It's the same saying, no different. And they keep saying, we're more precise now. Oh, don't worry, yeah, we got it, yeah. Probably we didn't know much then, but now we know more now. And each decade they know more, which tells me they don't know. They know next to nothing. We're all learning. And any geneticist, hand on heart, they'll tell you, actually, I mean, that's the amazing thing, isn't it? We know next to nothing, and that's the wonder of it. And so we should be cautious. It's high risk management that we should be dealing with. So that spin, and as soon as they start attacking organic without even a conversation with us, alerts, anyone should be alerted to that, because it says that we're probably a nerve end that they're trying to cortisone. But that ain't happening. That's not going to happen. They're not going to.
What should concerned New Zealanders do? What can we do?
So the first thing is always, we're in a political environment with us, so your local MP for sure. Get involved. There's GE-free communities, there's organic communities, there's a whole range of people opposing this position at the moment. But get engaged. They've made the process very complicated for sort of lay people, but do connect with the national body OANZ. There's the Soil and Health Association. It's 85 years old in New Zealand. Get in contact, become aware. There's a GE-free community. Find your niche. And I think that's, we're a very diverse community. That's the one thing. We're literally home gardeners right through to, Fonterra, Zespri, corporate. The organic community is not homogenised. Find your space, get involved, become that voice. But I do think your MP needs to know and engage with the ministers related to this.
Do we have examples of GMO contamination destroying organics businesses overseas?
Well, I can tell you right now that certainly there are. It's a bit, I'll just use the spray drift. So right now, even with organic, if you have a certified organic orchard, there's recognised drift. And so you'll have product that's taken out and has to be sold as organic as part of drift. And there's often communication with neighbours about the spray program, low wind, etc. So we're dealing with something that's absolutely intentional, right? Yeah. So, and globally, there's been farms taken out with drift, particularly. So let's just be really clear. The main production of GMO globally is in commodities. So you mentioned that word before. So we're talking about corn, soy, cotton, canola, wheat. So these are, and when there's drift, so there's product taken out and an inability to farm and loss of livelihood.
What is the cost of organic certification in New Zealand?
It varies. So if like I just mentioned before, that depending on your scale, if you're a domestic producer just for local regional food, it can cost you anywhere between sort of $300 to $400. If you're domestic national and a lot more sophisticated, that could cost you over $1,000, but if you're into export, it's a couple of $1,000s.
It depends on the certifier, isn't it? That's the thing,
well, that's pretty standard.
You've got Assured Quality, BioGrow, and OANZ.
And Organic Farm NZ.
NZ.
I'm on the Council of Organic Farm NZ, so that's for local and regional domestic food. So if I'm selling into cafes and I've got channels here running off here, no problem. But most people gear into either at a scale to domestic, national, or to export. Once you're in export, you've got to go with BioGrow or Assure Quality because you then, and that's the cost for most, it's expensive. You've got to be in business to export.
Well, I think we've covered everything. Thank you so much for your time, Brendan. It's been great talking to you.